All right, how's everyone doing? I am Rich Celenza. Thanks for checking out the Rich Celenza Show. So, what I think I'm going to call this podcast is being stuck in the wrong identity. And I think a lot of people get caught in this. And if you know anything about me, I teach a program where I really try to help men with their identity. That doesn't mean I'm here to change their identity, but if they do want to make changes, I can basically help with advice regarding that because I do think a lot of people, especially men, want to make different changes. They just don't know how to go about it. They may not have the balls to do it or the confidence to do it. And, a lot of times we're stuck in a certain identity that we're not happy being in, I guess, to a certain degree. Or they've kind of been boxed into a certain degree, right? So they may have been doing something for a long period of time, and that's kind of how people know you, which is cool. And you may not even mind that, but then you're kind of transforming into something else, and people are still kind of going back to thinking you were what you were previously. You may see these type of people as well, or you may be one of these people. So what I'm going to kind of talk about is kind of like my identity growing up for the most part was an Italian type kid, I guess you could say. Not that I necessarily looked super Italian. I really, for the most part, only hung with Italian guys. I grew up, for the most part, in Italian neighborhoods. I was only really around Italians, right? So I didn't know anything but that. That's basically the food I ate every day, the feasts I would go to, the lifestyle. My grandparents were all immigrants from Italy, with the exception of one that I never knew. And it was just my culture. And then as I got older too, I think with my grandfather maybe on one side of my family, my uncles being involved with different things, illegal, kind of mob or outfit orientated in Chicago maybe, you're kind of one of those kind of, kids you're from a family of that environment to a certain degree if they know the history of your family. And I remember even in school, I got caught doing something in high school. I went to a private Catholic school, and I went and rat someone out, truthfully. And then they said, "Well, you got to write a term paper for five-page term paper on something." And I says, "I don't. What are you talking?" And then literally my teacher said, "Hey, why don't you do? I'm going to have you do it on prohibition because that seems like what your family's." Where I could assume your family was a part of that in their past, and he was right. My grandfather was a big part of that throughout the Al Capone era and all that stuff. So I ended up writing that, but it was funny to even have your teacher kind of profile you. But then when I went to Florida is when it really kind of kicked in. We were already throughout high school gambling, even taking bets, here and there like kids do. But then when I hit Florida, my father was running a vending business, and a lot of people profile you and say, "Hey, you're Italian in the vending business from Chicago. What do you think people are going to think, right?" And then I started hanging out with a lot of guys from New York because a lot of New Yorkers were coming to Florida at that point in time. A lot of people in the Midwest were kind of going to California. So now I'm hanging out with a bunch of Brooklyn guys, some Jersey guys, and a lot of actually immigrants from Italy. I was hanging out in their restaurants or just hanging out with some of their kids and people as well. So then again, your identity mainly is kind of wrapped up looking like you're not necessarily in the mob, but you're kind of connected to these people and, you're friends with them, which the reality was I was friends with a lot of people that were involved in those environments, not only from Chicago, New York, even California. And then we started to travel a lot. We were doing a lot of gambling, going to Indian reservations, also hanging out in a lot of spots that were doing gambling legally and illegally. That could go for the Bahamas, California again. I don't care if it's Biloxi, all over the place. And the way I act and dressed, hung out in Vegas, even Atlantic City, you start to have an identity, right? And I get it. I knew what my identity was. I wasn't a fool, which I kind of liked. There's no question about that. Then I went on to make a couple films. And, and they were really they weren't necessarily about the outfit or the mob, but the first film was about the underground world of gambling in Chicago. And then I kind of wanted to do my second film, which was kind of about a hitman. It was actually a story more about a forensic team that creates a device and where you can download information from someone's brain, and if they get murdered, they become a witness to their own murder. But a hitman comes in and wipes out the team and takes it, and then it's a free-for-all. But then I was starting to become a father, more or less, which I wanted to be. Now I was kind of transforming into looking like a mob kind of guy, more into like a guy, I literally would wear a fanny pack with shorts all the time and a shirt. I was much heavier. I was lifting a lot of weights, but I looked like a tourist. And the reason I had a fanny pack is because I always had to carry a gun. And by looking kind of like a tourist and a Mr. Mom guy, fit really well because I got away with everything. I loved I'd have minivans, and I was still working for my father through this, off and on between making films. So it was a very kind of funny identity I had going on. It was like half this guy, this Chicago guy, collects money in the vending business, making films, and he's also a Mr. Mom kind of thing. And I wanted that. I had no problem with that. But I will say as time went on, and I've discussed this not a lot, that I didn't like the identity of a Mr. Mom. I loved being a dad. I loved going and living the lifestyle I led with my children in Florida. I wouldn't change it for the world, my 2 daughters. Basically, we lived like professional tourists for their life. Their lifestyle was unbelievable. Between going to the beaches, parks, just their whole lifestyle in general. Living in Florida, even going to California at times, and Chicago was just wonderful. And then, what then kind of happens with me actually, or what I saw was kind of changing like into now what identity, because I kind of I got a divorce, and then I was not working for my father. I wasn't in Chicago as much. I didn't kind of like the identity I had. I was kind of confused. I was really I'm like, where am I here? I'm like in my 40s. My sense of fashion was kind of changing a little bit. I didn't want to, before I kind of always looked kind of older, and I wanted to start looking more youthful. I also didn't like being heavy. So now I'm known as a big, heavier, guy who lifts weights or collects money or whatever. Now all of a sudden I lose 50 pounds, right? Now I'm 200 pounds. People start talking. They think you're sick. Even my family members, they want to know what's going on. And again, I'm just changing and evolving into something else. And it wasn't bad. I just wasn't interested. Even, people would ask me, Rich, wait a minute, what are you doing here? What's, even my clothes changed. I never wore jeans, say, my entire life, or fitted clothes, all these things. And the reason I bring this up is because I think, one thing is, I think we're all changing and we're evolving. We are, no matter, and if we're not, some people get caught, don't get me wrong. They're still dressing like they're in the 70s and 80s. My father's kind of like that. He likes vintage clothing, and he's kind of likes the same identity he had basically in the 70s and 80s. But for the most part, I think a lot of people do change. But I also think they don't realize they're changing, but they're also not necessarily always happy with maybe being stuck in one identity. And I also think you got to realize, I think we have multiple identities, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Let me get some water here. Even while I was growing up, I had and I think a lot of us have this. So if I'm in Chicago going to a private Catholic school, and then I was also playing, and I was wrestling and boxing, and then I was also playing tennis. And I was spending my summers in Florida. I even went to Nick Bollettieri Tennis Academy. What was interesting is, you're around all them and you look very preppy. But I was still kind of known as a Chicago kid. Then sometimes in Chicago when I'd be playing tennis, or I should say in Chicago, then a lot of the guys would be, hey, you're a tennis kid. You're a preppy kid. Like even the neighborhoods, when I'd go to different neighborhoods, if I'm in a preppy area, like I grew up also in a LaGrange area, which is an upper middle class area, me and my buddy were known as Cicero Taylor Street guys. But then when we'd go to Cicero and Taylor Street guys, we were known as preppy LaGrange guys. Again, we had different identities depending on where we were or how people perceived us. And it's just, I find all these things very interesting when it comes to our identity. And I don't think necessarily we have to be bogged down being always just one type of identity. I still have an identity, I think, to a certain degree, as being a Chicago guy. Okay? Really? But the people in Chicago will still look at me as kind of more of a Florida guy, right? And then when I was even in California, they'd ask me, where you from? And some thought I was a Florida guy, some thought I was a Chicago guy. Whatever the case may be. Some look at me as a filmmaker. Some may look at me now. It's kind of interesting now as an identity. They're like, Rich, you're a media influencer, a social media influencer, which I never expected for people to kind of look at me in that way. But that's an identity that's kind of maybe just gravitating towards me, and I'm gravitating towards it. And it's just kind of experimental, but I have no problem kind of being who I truly want to be at this point in time. If you're somebody who does want to start changing their identity, I do tell people, just start off slow and see how it flows for you. You don't have to go extreme. And again, you don't have to do any of it. It just may come naturally. But a lot of times I do see people that all of a sudden decide that they want to change their identity and go way overboard and go crazy. It could be their wardrobe or their lifestyle. And again, you can do whatever the hell you want to do. But just take your time figuring out who you want to be. And I talk about this in my Mastering Self-Confidence program. I mean, when it comes down to it, I really believe confidence comes down to you becoming who you truly want to be. And it's not just you being who you want to be. I mean, that's the biggest part of it, but also how you want other people to perceive you. If you truly want to go do something in your life with other people or succeed in a certain business, then you're going to, for the most part, not have to be, have an identity of exactly what you're going after. Standing out and being different is great. But you also have to identify with people believing in you and trusting you and wanting to work with you or helping you get to where you want to get to. So these are just things that this is something I really wanted to bring up regarding identity, because I have a lot of young guys that I think get kind of confused with identity now more than ever. They don't know, especially on social media, like what route to go. If they post certain things, how people are going to perceive them, and then down the road, they don't even know if they're going to want to keep doing it, and all these different types of things. I get it. And here's the thing I am going to wrap it up with. We all get profiled, and we all profile people. I don't give a shit what anybody tells me. We always are looking at people. When we see them, we're kind of judging them. I don't give a shit who you think you are. Sure, we want the best for most people. At least I do. I try to be as open-minded as possible. Does that mean I don't look at certain people and go, yeah, look at him, man. He looks like this, or look at that. He must be from here, or he must do that. And a lot of times I'm not right. I'm wrong, but we do profile. So if you do want to, people are profiling you too. And if you're not getting the results you want, or people aren't giving you the attention you want, or not helping you, maybe it is because of maybe the signals you're sending off or the way you look or dress. Again, I'm not telling you you have to change, but I am going to just tell you, a lot of how you dress and how you look, has a big impact on your life, even if you don't want to accept it, or, if you want to, acknowledge it or not. So anyways, just thought I would do a quick podcast on this, but yeah, man. Be who the hell you want to be. I don't know. I don't know who else to be but myself. I was thinking that the other day. I was going to do a podcast that I haven't come up with a name for it. Like, all I know, well, how was I going to word it? I only know how to be me. I can't be anybody but me. And even regarding creating anything, I'm so stubborn. I can't evolve into anything else but what I want to evolve into. And I can't do things that I don't want to do. Sometimes you just got to do shit that you don't want to do. Lately, I can't do it. So I don't know if that's what the hell's going on here. It's just, I'm kind of fighting myself all the time to a certain degree, saying, hey, you should probably go do this. I'm like, no, I don't feel like doing it. My energy's not leading me that way. And I may also stop myself from doing things that I know I should probably keep doing because it'll give me maybe the results I desired to a certain degree. But at the same time, I'm like, no, I don't feel like doing that. So it's very interesting regarding that. So anyways, you get a chance, check out my website, richcelenzapodcast.com.